The floorboard in the hallway outside my son's bedroom had creaked the same way for 30 years. I had always meant to fix it. That night, I was grateful I never did. I had come home early from my evening walk. A sharp pain in my knee had turned me back halfway down the street. The house was dark except for the light under my son's door, and I could hear his voice, low and careful, the way he spoke when he thought no one was listening. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I was simply moving through my own hallway, in my own house, on a Tuesday night in October, when the words reached me through the door and stopped me cold. "The guide knows what to do," my son said. "He's done this before. Dad's an easy mark. He trusts everyone. He goes wherever you point him, and once they're 3 days into the backcountry, there's nobody around for 40 miles. A pause. Then his voice again, quieter. "It'll look like a fall. Old man, bad knee, loose shale on a ridgeline. Nobody's going to ask questions." I stood in that hallway for what felt like a very long time. My hand was flat against the wall. I could feel my own heartbeat in my fingertips. My son. My only son. The boy I had taught to ride a bicycle in this driveway. The boy I had stayed up with through fevers and nightmares and a broken collarbone when he was 9 years old. The boy I had put through college and law school, and who had stood at an altar 3 years ago while I sat in the front pew and cried because I was so proud I didn't know what to do with myself. That boy was on the other side of that door, telling someone to kill me. I walked to the kitchen. I sat down at the table in the dark. "My name is Robert Harrison. I am 63 years old. I spent 31 years as a civil engineer for the state of Montana, and I retired 2 years ago with a pension, a paid-off house, and a life insurance policy worth $800,000. My wife, Margaret, passed 4 years ago pancreatic cancer, 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end. After she died, I updated my will. I left everything to my son. I did it the same week as the funeral because I couldn't stand the thought of loose ends. I remember thinking it was the responsible thing to do. I sat in the dark kitchen, and I thought about that decision for a long time. The hunting trip had been his idea. 2 weeks earlier, he had come to the house on a Sunday with a brochure and a smile that I now understood differently. A guided elk hunt in the Bob Marshall Wilderness. 5 days. A small outfit called Ridgeline Expeditions, a husband and wife team who ran backcountry trips out of Choteau. He said I had been moping around the house since retirement. He said I needed to get back into the mountains. He said he had already paid the deposit as an early birthday gift. I had been so touched that I had hugged him at the door when he left. The trip was in 9 days. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on top of the bed covers in the dark, and I thought through every angle of it the way I used to think through load calculations at work, methodically, without panic, one variable at a time. The first thing I understood was that I couldn't go to the police with what I had. I had heard half of a phone call through a closed door. My son would deny it. The guide, whoever he was, would deny it. I had no recording, no witness, nothing. A 63-year-old widower claiming his son was trying to have him killed for his life insurance. I could already hear how that would sound. The second thing I understood was that I had to go on the trip. I know how that sounds. But I had spent my entire career solving problems by understanding the structure of a situation before I tried to fix it. The structure here was this. My son had a plan, and the plan required me to go to Montana. If I didn't go, the plan didn't disappear, it just got postponed. He would find another way, another time, when I wasn't expecting it. The only way to end this was to be there when it happened and make sure I was the one who controlled what happened next. But first, I had some preparations to make. I called my attorney on Wednesday morning. Franklin Griggs had handled my family's legal work for 20 years, and he was one of the most discreet men I had ever known. I told him I needed to update my will immediately and that I needed it kept entirely confidential. We met at his office that afternoon. I removed my son from every document, the house, the pension, the life insurance, all of it, redirected to a charitable trust for a land conservation organization that Margaret had loved. I kept the changes off any system my son might have access to. Franklin understood, without my having to explain everything, that something serious was happening. On Thursday, I drove to an electronics store in Great Falls and bought a small voice recorder, the kind that clips to a shirt collar and runs for 12 hours on a single charge. The young man at the counter walked me through how to use it twice, very patiently. I also bought a personal locator beacon, a device that, when activated, sends GPS coordinates to emergency services via satellite. You don't need cell service. You don't need anything except the sky above you. I practiced with both devices every evening that week until operating them was automatic. I told my son nothing was wrong. I called him on Thursday night and said I was looking forward to the trip. I asked him what weight sleeping bag I should bring. He answered my questions in the easy, relaxed voice of a man who believed he had control of the situation, and I sat at the kitchen table and wrote down everything he said in a notebook. The morning I left, I drove past his house. His car was in the driveway at 6 a.m. I had half expected him to want to see me off, but he didn't come outside, and I understood then that he was keeping his distance deliberately. He didn't want to be the last person who saw me. The drive to Chateau took 2 hours. The Ridgeline Expedition's staging area was a gravel lot behind a small outfitter's shop on the edge of town, and when I pulled in, there were 2 men already loading gear into a horse trailer. One of them introduced himself as the lead guide, a thick-shouldered man in his 40s named Dale, with a sun-cracked face and the kind of handshake that was meant to communicate authority. The other man was introduced as a second guide, there to help with the horses and camp setup. His name was Marcus. He was younger, quieter, and he didn't quite meet my eyes when we shook hands. There was a third client on the trip, a retired schoolteacher from Billings named Owen, who had booked the hunt independently through the outfitter's website. He was 68 years old, cheerful, and entirely unaware of anything except that he hoped to see elk. We rode into the back country for most of the first day. The Bob Marshall Wilderness is one of the largest roadless areas in the lower 48 states. Over 1 million acres of mountains and river drainages, and timber so dense you can lose sight of a man 20 feet away. By the time we made camp that first evening, we were far enough in that the silence was complete. No road noise, no voices except ours, just wind and water, and the sound of horses shifting their weight in the picket line. That night, after Owen had gone to his tent, I sat by the fire longer than the others. I watched Dale and Marcus talking quietly near the horse line, their backs to me. Their conversation was too low to hear, but I saw Marcus glance in my direction twice. I went to my tent, and I did not sleep. The second day was uneventful in the way that a held breath is uneventful. We rode to elevation, glassed for elk, found nothing. Owen was good company. Dale was professional and attentive. Marcus was quiet and watchful, always positioned somewhere behind me on the trail, which I noticed and noted without reacting to. That evening, Dale announced the plan for the following morning, a pre-dawn climb to a ridgeline above camp, where he had glassed a herd of elk the previous fall. The terrain was steep, he said, but manageable. He recommended we leave the horses below and make the approach on foot. I said that sounded fine. After dinner, I excused myself early and went to check on my horse. The picket line was around the back of a stand of timber, away from camp, and I was alone there in the dark for about 10 minutes. I used that time to activate the voice recorder under my jacket and confirm that the personal locator beacon was in the inside pocket of my vest. I also checked the ridgeline on a topographic map I had printed before leaving home. The approach Dale had described would put us on a narrow shelf of loose shale at roughly 9,000 feet, with a drop of several hundred feet on the north face. The kind of terrain where a fall, in dim morning light, would be entirely plausible. I understood then exactly how it was supposed to happen. We started climbing at 4:30 in the morning. The temperature was below freezing, and the sky was still full dark. Owen went first, then Dale, then me, then Marcus. I was bracketed between them on the trail, which was deliberate, and which I let happen without comment. The first light came slowly, the way it does at elevation, a gray thinning of the dark rather than any sudden color. By the time we reached the shale band, I could see the drop on my left side and the ridge line above us, and Dale's silhouette, about 40 feet ahead, stopped and waiting. Marcus was directly behind me. Close. Closer than the terrain required. I stopped walking. "Your bootlace," I said, without turning around. A pause. "What?" "Your bootlace. It's been dragging for the last 100 yards. You'll go down on this terrain." I turned and looked at him directly. He was holding himself very still, his hands loose at his sides, and the expression on his face was the expression of a man who has been interrupted mid-thought. I held his gaze for a long 3 seconds, long enough to let him understand that I was not confused or distracted or afraid, and then I looked pointedly down at his boots. His laces were fine. He knew I knew. The color shifted in his face. "Let's keep moving," I said. When we reached Dale on the ridgeline, I positioned myself with the cliff face behind me and the 2 guides in front. Owen had moved ahead along the ridge to glass a drainage below and was about 60 yards away. I was outside his line of sight. Dale looked at me. Then he looked at Marcus. Something passed between them, and I watched it happen. "Mr. Harrison," Dale said, "why don't you come up here closer to the edge? Better angle on that drainage." I put my hand in my vest pocket. "I'm comfortable here," I said. "Tell me, how long have you known my son?" The silence that followed was different from the silences before it. Dale's jaw worked. He looked at the ground, then back at me. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do," I said. "I think he paid you a significant amount of money to make sure I didn't walk back out of these mountains. I think you've done this before, or something close to it. And I think the 2 of you are deciding right now whether to proceed or cut your losses." Marcus had taken a half step to my left. I turned my head toward him without moving my feet. "I wouldn't," I said. I pulled the locator beacon out of my pocket. It is a bright orange device about the size of a television remote, and both of them recognized it immediately. "This has been transmitting my GPS coordinates to a monitoring service since 4 o'clock this morning," I said. "The coordinates update every 10 minutes. If I stop moving, or if the device goes offline, they send emergency services. The response time to this area is approximately 4 hours by helicopter." I paused. "I also want you both to know that I've been recording this conversation and everything said in camp last night since approximately 8:15 yesterday evening." Neither of them moved. "Now," I said, "I want you to walk ahead of me back down this mountain. Owen is going to continue hunting because he has done nothing wrong and he deserves his trip. When we get back to the trailhead, the 3 of us are going to have a conversation with the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office. I am going to play them the recording. And you are going to decide, at that point, whether you want to cooperate and talk about my son, or whether you want to carry this alone." Dale sat down on a rock. He put his face in his hands. Marcus didn't say a word. He just started walking back down the trail. I called for Owen and told him a situation had come up and we needed to head out early. He was disappointed but asked no questions. He was that kind of man. The descent took 3 hours. I walked behind both guides the entire way, and I kept the locator beacon in my hand where they could see it. No one spoke very much. By the time we reached the horses, the sun was fully up, and the wilderness around us looked exactly like what it was. Beautiful and indifferent, and completely unconcerned with the particular disaster unfolding in this small corner of it. We rode out to the trailhead in a silence that felt geological in its weight. I called Franklin Griggs from the parking lot while Dale and Marcus sat in separate vehicles and waited. I called the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office. Then I sat on the tailgate of my truck and I looked at the mountains and I thought about my son. I thought about the Sunday he had brought me that brochure. The smile. The way he had said I already paid the deposit as if he were proud of himself. I thought about whether there had been any moment in the weeks before that when I might have seen what was underneath the smile if I had been paying attention. I went through it carefully, the way I go through everything, and I arrived at the conclusion that I had not missed anything, that he was simply good at concealing it, and that perhaps people who plan to do something like this have to be. I thought about his mother, and whether she would have seen it. I thought about her for a long time. The sheriff's deputies arrived within the hour. I played them the recording, including the fragment from that Tuesday night in the hallway, which I had gone back and recorded again from my own memory using the exact words I could recall directly into the device. before I left home. It wasn't perfect. It wouldn't be admissible in exactly the form I had it, but it was enough to start. Dale talked first. He talked for most of the afternoon. The amount my son had offered him was $22,000, half paid in advance via a wire transfer that Dale had not yet spent, and which was sitting in his account in a way that would be very easy to trace. Marcus had been brought in as backup in the event that I hired a second guide independently, which my son had apparently worried I might do. The plan in that case was that Marcus would handle it differently, and I didn't ask what differently meant. My son was arrested at his house that evening. He didn't say anything when they came. His wife, my daughter-in-law, who I believe knew nothing about any of this, stood on the porch and watched them put him in the car, and she looked like a woman watching a building fall down. I drove home to Great Falls the following morning. It was a Thursday, and the cottonwoods along the road had gone fully golden in the October cold. And the sky was that particular shade of blue that you only get in Montana in fall. I drove through it and I thought about how strange it is that the world continues to be beautiful while your life is collapsing. I did not cry. I want to be clear about that, not because I think it would have been weak, but because I want to be accurate. What I felt was not grief. Exactly. And it was not anger. It was closer to the feeling you have when you finally understand how a structure failed a bridge or a retaining wall, something you thought was solid, and you see that the failure had been built in from the beginning, and that all those years of standing had been a kind of accident. My son went to trial the following spring. His attorney argued that the whole thing had been a misunderstanding, that the recording was ambiguous, that Dale was a criminal willing to say anything for a deal. The jury deliberated for 11 hours. They found him guilty of solicitation of murder and conspiracy. He was sentenced to 22 years. His wife filed for divorce before the sentencing. I have spoken to her 3 times since the arrest, always briefly. She is a decent woman who made the mistake of loving someone who was capable of this, and I don't hold that against her. I am still in the house. The floorboard in the hallway still creaks. I have not fixed it. In the months after the trial, I found myself spending a great deal of time in the evenings, sitting at the kitchen table where I had sat that first night, in the dark, working through the problem. I would sit there after dinner with a cup of coffee, and I would not think about anything in particular. I would just sit in the house that I had shared with my wife, in the town where I had raised my son, and I would let the silence of it do whatever it needed to do. People have asked me whether I regret going on the trip, whether it would have been simpler to just go to the police immediately, or to quietly change my will and never go near the mountains at all. The attorney in Franklin's office asked me something like that, carefully phrased, when the whole thing was over. I told him what I believed then, and still believe now, that you cannot solve a problem by turning away from it. You can delay it. You can relocate it. But the only way to actually resolve a structure that is failing is to understand exactly how it is failing, and then to be there, with the right tools, when it fails. I also told him that a man my age has already had most of the experiences that define a life. The grief, the joy, the work, the losses. What you learn, if you're paying attention, is that almost nothing is as catastrophic as it looks in the dark at 3 a.m, and almost nothing is as solid as it looks in the good years. Most things are somewhere in the middle, and your only real job is to keep your head and do the next correct thing. That October, when I drove home through the golden cottonwoods, I stopped at a trailhead I know about 20 miles outside of town. I walked in about a mile to a ridge, where you can see the Rocky Mountain front, that great wall of mountains rising out of the plains in a line that seems to go on forever in both directions. Margaret and I used to come here in the fall. We would stand there for a while without talking, just watching the light change on the rock face. I stood there for maybe half an hour. The wind was cold and direct, and entirely without sentiment. Then I walked back to my truck and drove home and made myself dinner. The house was quiet, the way it has been since Margaret died. I have come to understand that quiet is not the same as empty. The walls hold everything that happened in them. The birthday parties, the arguments, the ordinary Tuesday evenings. All of it layered into the structure of the place. You just have to learn to be still enough to feel it. I was still going through my son's things the following spring when I found, in a box in his old bedroom, a photograph I had not seen in 30 years. He was maybe 4 years old in the picture, sitting on my shoulders at a state fair somewhere, both fists full of cotton candy, laughing at something I had apparently said. I remembered that day. I remembered the weight of him on my shoulders and how easy it felt. Carrying him, I put the photograph in a frame and set it on the shelf in the hallway, next to a picture of Margaret. I am not certain what that means, or whether it means anything at all, but it felt like the honest thing to do. And in the end, that is the only standard I know how to hold myself to, not the absence of betrayal. Because betrayal is something that happens to you, and you do not always get to choose it. The only thing you get to choose is what kind of person you are when it finds you. I chose to be the man who prepared, the man who stayed calm, the man who walked into the dark mountain and walked back out. I am still here. That is enough.